All right, well, welcome back to our podcast here at Gateway Church, and I have the pleasure of being with Andrea Wiggins and Gloria Mann as part of our mental and physical healthy and flourishing episode of our Flourishing series. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your background. We've got to talk a little bit, but Andrea, I want to start with you. Tell us how you got into the world of fitness training and what kind of propelled you into that.
Sure. So I've been a fitness trainer for probably about 15 years and doing it full-time as a business now for the last 7. But it really kind of started out of my own personal journey of, at the time when I was younger, not really feeling comfortable in my own skin. And so I kind of struggled with, at the time, what the definition of pretty was or beautiful was. And I didn't feel like I met the standards of what that looked like in the world. But I was really strong, and that wasn't something that was necessarily celebrated. And so I found, I went into the military right out of high school, and during that time is where I really started to love fitness, and it became important. Obviously, being in the military, fitness is important and health is important, but that's where I really kind of started to dive into the fitness journey and really learned about working out and taking care of myself. And I really learned that I had a love for strength training in particular. And so as I was growing in my journey and just absorbing everything that was fitness related, I would really start to have other people, in particular women, would come up to me and ask me if I could help them and help teach them. And I found that I really loved helping to empower women in that way because it was doing so much for me personally and really helping me to appreciate the body that God had given me and the things that I was blessed with. And so I was able to pass that on to them. And so that's when I became certified as a trainer. That's when I really dug into training and in particular strength training. And that's kind of what started my fitness journey. And so as I was growing in that, I went from the military into law enforcement. And in that career as well, fitness was really important. So I had really learned to really appreciate who I was. It had given me more an empowerment in who I was. And as a trainer and a coach now, I'm able to actually do that for women, the same thing for women that God had kind of walked me through, and now I get to kind of pass that on.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And Gloria, I know you're a mental health therapist. What got you into that world that is so prevalent that we're seeing it? There's so much more conversation and awareness around it, but how did you get started into that?
Yeah, so I think I would just say that I always, when I was growing up, I knew that I loved helping people and being able to listen to things that are going on for themselves. And so it wasn't until college, though, that I was volunteering with some youth and realizing that I could do this as a profession. And so I went to graduate school and learned that I could be a therapist. And so that's how I kind of got here. And so I've been doing this for about 13 years and just being able to work with clients and helping them go from a place of survival to thriving has just been so life-giving for me.
That is awesome. That's really cool. With so much conversation these days around holistic healing and self-care, what does it look like to be healthy in these areas? Like for example, like the gym and lifting and running has always been a part of my life, but I just recently, for the first time, got a therapist, as a matter of fact, about a month ago. So if he's watching, hopefully you're proud of me saying that out loud. I never thought I would probably say that out loud, but I think the original, the piece of that I really wonder is like, I know what in my mind, what it looks like to be physically healthy, and everybody has their different standards, but I wasn't sure what that looked like mentally. But what piece of that could you say, like to you, for somebody listening, what are some guidelines that you say would describe being physically healthy and then mentally healthy?
So for physically health, I think I like to kind of keep it simple because I think a lot of times what gets people scared about that is they think it has to look a certain way, or it has to look measurements, or it has to look the way it looks in a magazine. And so for most people, I tell them, just what do you enjoy doing? You know, it kind of start with what's fun for you. And so I have several gals in my life group. I have one gal, she's an avid hiker. She loves hiking. And so she's amazing in how well she does it, how far she can hike. But that's something that she really enjoys and really makes her feel good in her body. I have another gal, she's a martial artist. She's an amazing, incredible martial artist. And it's not traditional what you would think about when you talk about health, but she loves it. And so she really thrives in that, and it helps to keep her body healthy. I have another gal who loves being in the water, so she does swimming. So for me, when I think about it, I try to keep it simple as how do you add more movement to your life?
That's good.
And sometimes that's a little less intimidating than exercise because that gets kind of scary. And then just start with what you enjoy doing. It may be going for a walk. It may be swimming. It may be just kind of playing tennis with some friends. But just getting movement and being active, you're going to find that once you start doing that, you start to love how it feels in your body. And then exercise doesn't become so intimidating. And when we look at it as movement and doing things that you enjoy, that's the way you kind of start to get physically healthy. And it doesn't have to be prescribed. It doesn't have to look like someone else is doing. It's just what can you do to be more active, and start with what you enjoy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. And Gloria, how would you answer that question? What does I know that may seem like there's so many ways you could answer that, but what does being mentally healthy look like? Or when you have clients come in and say, I just want to get to this place. Like, how do you help them understand it's a journey, and how wrap their minds around what it looks like to be mentally healthy?
Yeah. So I think a lot of clients come in their first session and they're like, I don't want to feel anxious anymore. I don't want to feel sad anymore. And the first thing I often tell them is that, being anxious and being sad and all of those emotions are important towards just being a human, right? Like if we didn't feel anxious and we crossed the street, like we would get hit, immediately. Right. And so those emotions are an important part of our life. It's being mentally healthy is really being able to know that you're going to have these emotions, and how do you deal with it? How do you handle it? We call it like emotional regulation, but like how do you stay calm, cool, collected when hard things come? Like how do you deal with it? And so that's when we talk about mental healthiness, that's how I would describe what it is.
Having the tools, not just like a desired outcome, but having the tools to manage that.
Correct. Yeah. And so
That's
being
great.
able to just, deal with it.
Yeah. So sometimes, and I want to start with you, Gloria, on this question, but sometimes in both of these areas, the journey can seem way too daunting, right? A person can look and say, man, I have way too much weight to lose, or I've never picked up a weight in my life. This is just impossible. I'm never going to be at this place. And on the other side, somebody might say, there's just so much trauma in my life. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to unpack. I don't want to go through that pain again. What's one step, if somebody's listening, that they can journey into starting being mentally healthy? One or two things that can get the eye off of the huge destination and just starting.
Yeah. So I think that first, acknowledging that this is a big step for anybody. I mean, even the smallest steps is a big step of bravery. And so I wanted to acknowledge that for anybody who wants to start there. But with that being said, I think it's just starting small, right? And so if you are like, my trauma is so big, like who is just one person that you can trust that maybe you don't have to tell them what's going on, but you can just reach out to them and say like, hey, I just want to talk, or even text. Or, for somebody else, it's like doing a 5-minute mindfulness break, or even something as silly as like when I'm washing my hands, being fully present instead of disassociating. I think sometimes people think it has to be this big thing, but it doesn't. It's just something small that they can do that feels manageable for them. And every person starts differently.
Yeah.
It's different for every
For the person out there listening saying, man, I've been thinking about therapy. They might say, but I don't have the money, I don't have the time.
Yeah.
What are maybe some resources or things, some ways that they could get started in actually finding a professional that can help them?
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of social media, there's a lot of things that are often portrayed negatively, but there's so much media and content on social media that they can find. I think you can just type in like #therapist.
Yeah.
And you'll find so much material that you can get for free, honestly. And being able to incorporate even one piece of that, or starting to follow somebody, I think that is already a big step for somebody to take.
Yeah, that's awesome. And same question for you, Andrea. When it might seem daunting, I think physical fitness and a journey of health and wellness for some people, this is going to be really difficult, right? How would you encourage them? Like for me, I felt like when I ran a marathon last year for the first time ever. But it wasn't out of inspiration. I had just been in the gym for a long time. I was like, I don't like running. But I'm like, I don't want that to weigh on my head. I want to be able to do the hard thing, right? And so I'm like 1 mile, next week 2 miles. But it was more out of a place of, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to tough this out because I want to say I did it. But for somebody who maybe isn't coming from that kind of a space, or they don't have that fitness journey, what's one place that they can start? Well, how would you encourage them?
Probably similar, like I had mentioned before, is just think about it as far as movement. So if you're kind of, depending on where you're at, if you're sitting at the desk all day, or you're not, which a lot of people are doing now, especially we're working from home or at the desk, a lot of times just getting more movement in your life is good. And so it's probably one of the things that's made the fitness apps huge. Like we've got the Fitbit and the Apple Watch, and a lot of those things that they track is how many steps did you get in a day. So if you can just start with some form of movement, I think is a good place to start. But another thing I like to remind people of is a lot of times, depending on what's going on in their life, and I think this even relates to what you do, so many times, a lot of the stresses come is just how we're taking care of ourselves. And I've found that a lot of people where their biggest struggle is just, are you sleeping? And we never think about that when we think about fitness or we think about being healthy. We're thinking about the do, but we forget about the rest. And that is such a huge part of having a healthy body is, are you getting enough rest? Are you sleeping enough? And it sounds so basic and it sounds like it's something so easy to do, but there's so many people I talk to and they're happy if they get 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night. And so it's like, they think that's good because they got 5 hours of sleep. And I'm like, oh man, you would be so surprised at how much easier everything becomes when you're rested and you have sleep. So for some people, I may not even say it's even doing anything physically. It's how are you sleeping? Are you sleeping every night? And so starting with something like that, because a lot of times it's just being able to be rested in your body gives you a change of perspective on everything that's going on. So your physical activity is going to be better. Your nutrition is going to be better. Everything is going to be better if you're just making sure to get something as simple as just, are you getting enough sleep?
Yeah. And it's the antithesis to hustle culture nowadays, right? It's getting rest. It's like, no, don't sleep, stop, don't stop, like keep grinding. But actually, my wife just started this year going to the gym with me and like joining me in this fitness journey, and she's loving it and she's seeing things change. And it's been really cool to go together. But we read this article together the other day that actually mentioned that on rest. And it talked about specifically like in people's physique, there was like a 40% noticeable difference in terms of strength when you got 8 hours versus when you got less than 7. Like a 40%, that's a big deal. And so I think that's such a great place to start of like, are you getting rest? Because you're not going to wake up disciplined if you wake up tired and, lethargic and hurting. Absolutely. So one thing that I wanted to ask both of you is, how would you say that both of these areas are important to people's spiritual journey as well? So why should they incorporate it in their lives, and how does it intersect maybe in your own life, how to intersect with your story and following Jesus? And why is it so important in today's day and age of like taking care of your body, not just spiritually and joining a group and coming to church? That's awesome, but we're also holistic beings and taking care of ourselves physically and mentally. Why is that important?
Can we get started?
Oh, sure. For me, it was such a God thing, and because mine was so based on feeling out of place in my own body. And so God just really showed me who I was by learning to just accept who I was. And so spending time getting healthy really helped me to step more into who God created me to be. And so once I found the appreciation for how he created me and how he wired me, then I was able to really show up in my life a lot differently. And when you show up in your life differently, you can empower others in the same way. And so I think you can't really divorce the physical from the spiritual, because God created us and he wired us and made us all in very specific ways and very unique ways. And so he spent so much time creating us, and that this is the way we honor him, by taking care of his creation. And so sometimes we forget that. I forget that. Sometimes I get lost in what it looks like to the world, or what the world says perfection or beauty looks like. But I remember Carlos talking last week about the creativity of God. And we're a representation of that. And so when we care for ourselves, it's not even a vanity thing. It's taking care of the vessel that God gave us, taking care of the way we represent him and show up in the world. And so I think the empowerment we get from caring for our body allows us to shine for God in a different way too, and to really show off the creativity of what he's done in us.
That's so cool. I love that. Yeah.
I mean, piggybacking off of what you're saying, even Andrea, God has created all of us. And so that includes physical health and mental health. And I mean, one of the initial questions I often ask clients when I first meet them is like, how are you taking care of yourself physically? Because if you're not physically taking care of yourself, you're not mentally taking care of yourself. And you're also like unable to also be spiritually healthy. And so they are also intertwined, that it's really hard to break those apart.
Yeah.
And knowing that, if I can take care of myself mentally, I'll be able to handle really hard things and be able to acknowledge that it's hard, and then also give myself self-compassion and know that, hey, we all go through hard things, but we can do it.
Yeah.
And knowing that, hey, God is here to equip me with that skill, and trusting in that.
Yeah, because we're 3-part beings, right? Body, mind, and spirit. And from what I'm hearing from you guys is, taking care of yourself is important so that you can get out of the way. In essence, sometimes we never get healthy in these areas, and so we always stay self-focused and self-conscious. Yeah. We know I'm just an anxious person. Well, if you've never gotten help and never taken steps to get healthy, you're always going to stay stuck in that identity. But once you begin the journey, you begin to say, okay, now I know who God's created me to be, and I can help others along.
Yeah.
Yes.
So once you get healthy,
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I mean, it's
Gloria.
even like that, like I know it's a cliche now, but that oxygen mask kind of saying,
Yeah.
you put on your own oxygen mask. And people often think like that's so like self-serving, but the reality is you put on your mask so that you can help other people and you can like be God's vessel to what you're saying, and knowing that like when I'm healthy, when I can like care for myself, I can care for other people in a way that can like truly be meaningful and helpful for so many others.
That's awesome. That's so good. I think that's a great place to end our time together. Take one step today to get mentally, physically healthy, not just for you, but for the people around you, for your family, for your coworkers, and to help people step into that identity of holistic healing. I think that's so awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much.